Okay, Brigadier General Kevin Killea, K-E-V-I-N-K-I-L-L-E-A.
Great, we can go ahead and begin.
Okay.
Sir, if you could just explain what the AWE is and why we're out here.
Well, good morning, Kyle.
Good morning, sir.
So the AWE is the Advanced Warfighting Experiment. It's a culmination of multiple limited objective experiments that the lab has been doing over the past couple of years. The focus has been on company landing team operations, focused on logistics, fires, and also communications. But it's not limited to that. The lab is looking at many other areas of technologies that we're trying to explore to see if we can enhance the effectiveness of the Marines in the field. For example, we have a lot of shock trauma platoon type capabilities that we're trying to enhance, and some areas that we're trying to improve on as well. It's all about keeping an eye on the future. The future's Directorate motto, not without an eye on the future. We want to see the environments that we're going to be operating, the current capabilities of the MAGTF, and how we can enhance those capabilities as we go forward.
How important is something like this? I mean, bringing the Marines out here, integrating what we're doing with the Futures Directorate in the lab with 3rd Marines and having them test these concepts and capabilities. How important is that to the Marine Corps?
Yeah, it's a good point, because we back in the lab and in Quantico, and even talking with the operational forces across the fleet, we can do a lot via Tandberg and phone and email, but we really can't understand the impact of some of the technologies and some of the techniques and procedures that we want to experiment with, unless we get out here, we get in the field, and we use live force experimentation to really flush it out. I can, for example, LS3, the legged squad support system that's in the background there, I can use that all I want in the hills in Boston and in 29 Palms going up rocky terrain, but unless you put it in the hands of Marines and you have them use it as they would use it in a resupply mission, for example, that they've been doing for the last couple of days, you're not going to get the data points. You're not going to get the issues that they had with it, or hearing from a lance corporal or a corporal, this is what we need this to do to make it better. That's gold, and all of us sitting around a table in Quantico, we can't come up with that.
The feedback you've had from the Marines using these technologies, some of the technologies are, well, they're fantastical, and
Yeah.
other ones, they seem mundane because it's a Jeep or something that looks just like another vehicle, but it's different. So how has that been for them, and what have you learned from them? How are they seeing it?
Yeah, the first thing I've learned is that they are enthusiastic about supporting us with these technologies and trying to really wring them out in a field environment like this. The fantastical technologies that you referred to, when they first come in and look at that and they get trained on it, maybe it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but when they bring it out in the field and they see some goodness in it, even if there are challenges, they'll bring that back, and then we can phase into what that should look like going into the future. The equipment that they're familiar with, like an ITV, and we do modifications to it to help enhance what they wanted to do out in the field. They're really enthusiastic about things like that. But they're also really good at identifying gaps or weaknesses in those capabilities right up front. And so for us, it's like I said, it's mutually beneficial that we can get the feedback from them. At the same time, we can help them with their mission even today, despite the fact that we're looking out for future force.
Okay. If you could put it kind of simply for me, a little bit of the process of, we come up with concepts or ideas. We then test them, assess them, look at them, and then, what happens next? So if you walk us through real simple, we do this, we go here, and then we hope to get there with it, so folks understand how this really works for the Marine Corps.
Okay, so at the broader level, if you take a capstone concept like Expeditionary Force 21, for example, which is going to really drive the way we fight. It's not going to change how we fight, but the way we fight, in the sense of maybe being more dispersed forces, having to depend more on aggregation of forces if an issue comes up. That's exactly what's going on here today with company landing team operations. With regard to taking a concept like that, going to the Fleet Marine Forces and asking them, what do you have right now and how do you operate? And can you just simply walk into these type of operations without issue? And you get from them what they think the areas might be, if that's communications or logistics, etc. Now you take those gaps and you try to apply technologies to them, like we're doing here in this AWE. When we take the data from this AWE and we go back home and we see what worked and what didn't, now I get together with the combat development folks in Quantico and eventually maybe the SysCom folks when we want to transition some technology to get out to the field. Obviously, we're not going to field things without a hard requirement. You know the process, but we have to take a lead. We have to be out in front of formal requirements and formal policy to really ring out what we think is going to work technology-wise. And be ahead of the process and say, this gap that you identified, we think we have a solution for it. Give it to the combat development folks and let it run from there. And then for us at the lab and at the Futures Directorate, what's next? You know, let me look another 5 or 10 years out and let's look at Expeditionary Force 21 and see if we need to redo that, modify that a little bit based on the current environment or the future environment that our leadership thinks we're going to be in.
I want to go back to a little bit of what you touched on at the beginning, the importance and necessity of live force experimentation and what that does when it comes to assessing concepts, capabilities, things that you can't feel and touch, but Marines have to try to employ. How important is that?
Well, it's really important, and I'll give you a concrete example in communications. When we look at the capstone concept of Expeditionary Force 21 and we see dispersed forces and having to be able to control them from afar, you can get a satellite radio and say, here's how we're going to do it, here's the solution. But unless you put that radio in the field, you put it in terrain like this, where line of sight is very much limited, and it depends on the satellites, but how is that satellite communication routed through your equipment, and does it work 100% of the time in all environments? You're not going to know. Technology looks real good when it comes out of the box, but unless you get it dirty and you get it in the field and you test it, you don't really know if it's going to work.
As far as Hawaii goes, the challenges that this unique terrain and environment provide to the experiment that you're conducting, how important is it? How vital is that? Because it's different from most any place we've been.
Certainly it has its challenges up here in Kahuku, but we also have a company that's down at McTabb, Marine Corps Training Area, Bellows, completely different environment. That's a beach environment, not as wooded, not as thick as this, not as mountainous at all. And so the technologies down there are being tested in different areas than the technologies here. So Hawaii has provided us a venue in one place where we could put out 3 different company landing teams and have 3 different complete environmental challenges to them, to their mission, and to the equipment that we're trying to get them to test for us.
We're also obviously embedded in RIMPAC. We've taken advantage of something that's already occurring. Why is that important? How has that worked for us? And also being part of that largest naval exercise in the world.
Well, it comes down to coalition partners and your allies that are here as part of RIMPAC. And if you look closely around us here, it's not all Marines. There's ROC Marines here. There's Marines from Indonesia, and that integration is very important because when we have an issue that we're going to have to respond to in the real world, we know that we're not going to be doing it alone. And if you don't train ahead of time, then you don't have the time that really happens, and things aren't going to go as well. So this training is in these type of technologies. They're seeing it, they're getting hands-on, and when it does transition, if it transitions, it won't be the first time they see it, and they'll understand how we want to use it, and they'll be able to integrate with us better. So RIMPAC, it's huge that we have that the variety of forces in RIMPAC to even help us flush out these experiments that much more.
Okay. Yesterday we had the UHEC, Ultra Heavy Lift Amphibious Connector. The Marine Corps is obviously looking at like a new connector concept, family of connectors, some way to get Marines and equipment and things they need ashore the right way for a variety of reasons. How does UHEC play into that? And it wasn't a complete success in everything it did yesterday, but how do we learn from that, moving forward?
Yeah, so a lot of what we're doing is demonstrating technology, and The Leggett support system behind us is a great example of that. The technology that's in the sensors of that vehicle is really what we're flushing out. And it may transition to something that supports Marines in the future, but I guarantee you it won't look like that. It'll look something different because of everything that we've learned, the goods and the bads, and what we think something that would support Marines in the field would look like. UHAC's the same way. The technologies that we're flushing out, if you will, in UHAC or wringing out is a captive air cell technology that allows it to disperse a lot of weight across an area, and also those captive air cells, or the paddles that you see in the UHAC, are able to transverse very different types of terrain, from mud flats to rocky slopes, and to be able to get over those. So again, when we look at Connector Next, we have programs of record right now for LCU replacement. We have programs of record for upgrades to our LCACs. UHAC is not going to replace any of those. It's Connector Next beyond that, and what we think we can improve upon when it comes to size, weight, and speed of ship-to-shore connectors. And UHAC is one of many technologies that we're exploring to help us in that area.
I think the last question I've got is to touch on the inside of what we're doing. So the observer controllers, the data collection, and really taking a hard look at what's being collected, and then pulling that data together. If you can just touch on their role and how important that is.
The observer controllers, I can't thank them enough. They come from all across the Marine Corps, from elements, every element of the MAGTF, and they're really going to tie it all together at the end, or help us tie it together, because for example, when we have Marines out with the Leggett support system or with the GUS, the unmanned ground system, they may not catch some of the things that those technologies are doing right or wrong, but the observer controllers can. The observer controllers are also in the loop with the command element and know what the plan is and what the scheme of maneuver is, and they can also bring in lessons learned that even the platoon commanders may be missing. But without them, and without the data collection piece and the follow-on analysis that comes from that, we're wasting a lot of time, effort, and money out here with just pushing technologies into the fleet or life force experimentation. They're a critical enabler to the so what that comes from an experiment like this.
I do want to add one more. The experience level that the Marines, that the experiment force brings. I mean, you've got a lot of Marines here who've got a lot of years in the Corps. They've seen combat, they've lost brothers, they know what's going on, so they understand the importance of this. How critical is what they bring, their experience, to looking at these things and the concepts and deciding how it's going to go for the Marine Corps?
I think as critical as the observer controllers, they bring a capability and an experience level that will help us not only day to day in the execution of the live force experimentation, but at the end when we wrap it up and do the analysis and come to some conclusions on, like, here is the next step. They're almost a sanity check for us because of all the experience they have and how many of these they've done in the past, both in the uniform and out. So yeah, I think it's definitely a multifaceted effort from all the individuals that are playing here. We couldn't do it without any one of them. Nobody could do this on their own and come up with a successful experiment with some hard, concrete conclusions at the end by themselves. It's a team effort for sure.
Excellent. Johnny, I missed anything?
Sir, you're an aviator. What did you fly?
I flew F-18s.
F-18, sir. When you walk around and look at all this technology and things like that, and what we're trying to do, personally, what does it mean to you, and what does all this mean to you personally when you see all this coming from the experience that you've had supporting Marines, ground Marines in the fight?
Well, I mean, it means a lot, because as an aviator, my primary role in life was to support the Marine on the ground, to be that extra combat arm that combined fires, if you will, in the MAGTF from the sky, as well as everything that is supporting the Marine on the ground, fires-wise, whether it's artillery or mortars, etc. I think watching it at this level, watching it all get tied together in that tent that's right behind us by a company and their staff to integrate digital fires, and to support that with aviation and ground elements combined, certainly not sequential type of fires, but combined at the right place at the right time. That's everything. And whether you're flying F-18s or you're the assault support elements, the 53s that are coming in, the V-22s that are coming in, all of that timing, all of that combined effort, that cohesive effort is helping that corporal, that sergeant, that staff sergeant that's up the road in the blocking position right now and as part of this exercise.